This is a read aloud recording for Stanley's Release. That's the title of the story. An excerpt from Holes by Louise S. Shire. Now, keep in mind, you always want to do a quick scan of the text and you jump out and you look, what is all of this? Well, an excerpt is normally a part of a story from a whole story. So there's actually in a book, and it'll explain everything right here. So the part that's taken to fit into this begins right here. Why is this important? Because if you jump out and you look at this thing, this is not a book. It's just a pamphlet composed of a lot of short stories, informational text. Because if it was a book, it would be super thick. Okay? So right away, the authors tell you exactly what it is, realistic fiction. So it's real, but it's not true. So looking at our taps that was discussed the other day, it's going to follow this format. Think of the tone. How do you feel when you read this? What is the theme of Stanley's Release? As you go down, who do you think this story was written for? The purpose is definitely not to inform, so we're going to cross that off. This one is right here in this area. It's to entertain. And the structure, let's just look at the sentences in the paragraph format. You should immediately notice, look at this on the page 23. It's short, choppy paragraphs, and there's a lot of dialogue in stories when there's characters, a plot, setting, problems, climax. Check out, these are all short, choppy paragraphs, and almost every single paragraph is starting with a quote. So there's dialogue going back and forth. Well, not that one. But if you look on the next page, check this out. Quote, 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 quote. So it's kind of like talking to a friend or talking to your parents. There's a lot of back and forth, and you can see this. And if we're scanning the rest of the story, not that one. It goes all the way to 78 paragraphs, but this is not like 78 paragraphs from the 50 States Plus, all that super long one where it was only 19 paragraphs for the story that was read a couple days ago on the state government and its citizens. That was informational text, as you can see, informational social studies. This one, much different. Let's jump in because it's already 2 minutes and 40 seconds. Here we go. Stanley's Release, an excerpt from Holes by Louise S. Holes is so if you like this story, get the book, read the book. Holes is a Newbery Award-winning book by Louise S. about an adolescent boy, Stanley Yelnates, who was punished for a crime he didn't commit and unjustly sent to a boys' juvenile detention center at Camp Green Lake. Quote, a dry, flat wasteland in Texas. In fact, I think there's a book on this, where he and the other boys are forced to dig 5-foot holes in the desert. Although the warden claims this punishment is meant to build the boy's character, she's actually searching for something valuable. A treasure that was buried over 100 years ago by a teacher turned bandit named Kate Barlow. It so happens that Kate Barlow had stolen this treasure from Stanley's great-grandfather during a robbery, however. Stanley does not know this when we meet him in the following passage. What he does know or believe is that he and his family have had bad luck for generations due to a curse put on his great-great-grandfather by a one-legged gypsy. In this excerpt, keyword excerpt, so it's a part of a story, from the book, chapter 48, Stanley's lawyer, Miss Marengo, who arrives at the camp with the Texas Attorney General, has finally managed to secure Stanley's release. But she must first face the ill-tempered and devious warden, who is determined to blame Stanley for yet another crime he has not committed. Stanley's strong sense of loyalty to his friend could be a theme right there. Okay. Hector Zero Zerani comes through in this excerpt as he refuses to leave Camp Green Lake without him. Stanley does not yet realize that his friendship with Hector will finally put an end to the curse that has been hanging over his family's fortunes for centuries. So again, when you are reading the excerpt, it's very important. They give you this information. You need to read it because if you haven't read the book, you will miss a lot of key pieces. Here we go. Paragraph 1. They slowly walked back to camp. The tall man was the Texas Attorney General, the chief law enforcement officer for the state. Stanley's lawyer was named Miss Marengo. Stanley held the suitcase. He was so tired he couldn't think straight. He felt as if he was walking in a dream, not quite able to comprehend what was going on around him. They stopped in front of the camp office. Mr. Sir went inside to get Stanley's belongings. The Attorney General told Mr. Pendeski to get the boys something to drink and eat. Now, have you ever had trouble saying the word like I do every now and then? Okay, of course, you tell someone to say it correctly for you, or you can just say Mr. P. Okay. The warden seemed as dazed as Stanley. Quote, so here's the first dialogue. You can't even read. End of quote. She said to Zero. Zero said nothing. Notice it's a short, choppy sentence. 3 words in that sentence. It speeds things up. Miss Marengo put a hand on Stanley's shoulder and told him to hang in there. He would be seeing his parents soon. She was shorter than Stanley, but somehow gave the appearance of being tall. Mr. P returned with 2 cartons of orange juice and 2 bagels. Stanley drank the juice, but didn't feel like eating anything. Wait! Exclamation point. The warden exclaimed, I didn't say they stole the suitcase. It's his suitcase, obviously, but he put my things from my cabin inside it. That isn't what you said earlier, said Miss Marengo. Moving on. Quick scan. They give you a little picture. There's Stanley's belongings right there. Paragraph 11, page 24. Paragraph 11. What's in the suitcase? The warden asked Stanley. Tell us what's in it, then we'll open it and see! Exclamation point. Stanley didn't know what to do. Stanley, as your lawyer, I advise you not to open your suitcase, said Miss Marengo. He has to open it, said the warden. I have the right to check the personal property of any of the detainees. How do I know there aren't drugs or weapons in there? He stole a car, too. I've got witnesses. She was nearly hysterical. He is no longer under your jurisdiction, said Stanley's lawyer. He has not been officially released, said the warden. Open the suitcase, Stanley. Do not open it, said Stanley's lawyer. Stanley did nothing. Mr. Sir returned from the office with Stanley's backpack and clothes. The Attorney General handed Miss Marengo a sheet of paper. You're free to go, he said to Stanley. I know you're anxious to get out of here, so you can just keep the orange suit as a souvenir, or burn it, whatever you want. Good luck, Stanley. Next page. 25. Paragraph 21. He reached out his hand to shake, but Miss Marengo hurried Stanley away. Come on, Stanley, she said. We have a lot to talk about. Stanley stopped and turned to look at Zero. He couldn't just leave him here. Zero gave him thumbs up. I can't leave Hector, Stanley said. Notice how the quotes are done. Okay, pay attention to that. I suggest we go, said his lawyer with a sense of urgency in her voice. I'll be okay, said Zero. His eyes shifted toward Mr. P on one side of him, then to the warden and Mr. Sir on the other. There's nothing I can do for your friend, said Miss Marengo. You are released pursuant, that's a vocab word, pursuant to an order from the judge. They'll kill him, said Stanley. Your friend is not in danger, said the Attorney General. There's going to be an investigation into everything that's happened here. For the present, I am taking charge of the camp. Come on, Stanley, said his lawyer. Your parents are waiting. Stanley stayed where he was. His lawyer sighed. May I have a look at Hector's file, she asked. Certainly, said the Attorney General. Miss Walker, go get Hector's file. Moving on. Always check out the pictures. You can zoom out. Moving on. Next 2 pages. Keep in that mind, what would be the theme of this story? Who's it written for? It's definitely to entertain. And how have the sentences been changing? Look at all these short, fast, choppy sentences. Paragraph 34. 1 paragraph is 1 sentence. She looked at him blankly. Well? The warden turned to Mr. P. Bring me Hector Zeroni's file. He stared at her. Get it, she ordered. Mr. P. went into the office. He returned a few minutes later, announced the file was apparently misplaced. The Attorney General was outraged. What kind of camp are you running here, Miss Walker? The warden said nothing. She stared at the suitcase. Remember, you can follow along with a finger, a pen, or even a laser pointer. The Attorney General assured Stanley's lawyer that he would get the records. Excuse me while I call my office. He turned back to the warden. I assume the phone works. He walked into the camp office, slamming the door behind him. A little while later, he appeared and told the warden he wanted to talk to her. She cursed, then went inside. Stanley gave 0 thumbs up. Caveman, is that you? One moment. He turned to see Armpit and Squid coming out of the rec room. Squid shouted back into the rec room. Caveman and Zero are out here. Paragraph 47. Soon all the boys from Group D had gathered around him and Zero. Good to see you, man, Armpit said, shaking his hand. We thought you were buzzard food. Stanley is being released today, said Mr. P. Way to go, said Magnet, hitting him on the shoulder. And you didn't even have to take a step on a rattlesnake, said Squid. Even Zigzag shook Stanley's hand. Sorry about ... You know, that means there's a pause. Okay, whenever you see that, that's a pause. Paragraph 53. It's cool, said Stanley. We had to lift the truck clear out of the hole, Zigzag told him. It took everybody in C, D, and E. We just picked it right up. Again, there's all the holes. Here's another picture. Page 28. Car taking off. Paragraph 55. It was really cool, said Twitch. X-Ray was the only one who didn't come over. Stanley saw him hang back behind the others a moment, then returned to the rec room. Guess what, said Magnet, glancing at Mr. P. Mom says we don't have to dig any more holes. That's great, Stanley said. Will you do me a favor, asked Squid. I guess, Stanley agreed, somewhat hesitantly. I want you to... He turned to Miss Marengo. Hey, lady, you have a pen and a paper I can borrow? Question mark. She gave it to him, and Squid wrote down a phone number, which he gave to Stanley. Call my mom for me, okay? Tell her... Pause. Tell her I said I was sorry. Tell her Alan said he was sorry. Stanley promised he would. Now, you be careful out in the real world, said Armpit. Not everybody is as nice as us. Stanley smiled. Paragraph 66. Last page of this excerpt. The boys departed when the warden came out of the office. The Attorney General was right behind her. My office is having some difficulty locating Hector Zeroni's records, the Attorney General said. So you have no claim of authority over him? Asked Miss Marengo. I didn't say that. He's in the computer. We just can't access his records. It's like they've fallen through a hole in cyberspace. A hole in cyberspace, Miss Marengo repeated. How interesting. When is his release date? I don't know. How long has he been here? Like I said, we can't. So what are you planning to do with him? Keep him confined indefinitely without justification while you go crawling through black holes in cyberspace? The Attorney General stared at her. He was obviously, big word right here, incarcerated for a reason. If you ever come to big words, just sound it out by syllables. Oh, and what reason was that? The Attorney General said nothing. Stanley's lawyer took hold of Zero's hand. Come on, Hector. You're coming with us. That was it for page 29. And you can see then the next story comes up. The next story will be science fiction. And that's a wrap for the read aloud on the excerpt. Let's go back to the very beginning. You can see the pictures of Stanley's release. Remember, always keep in mind, this was definitely narrative form. So what was the theme? Who was this written for? Purpose was to entertain, and the sentence structure was definitely choppy due to all the dialogue.